The auctioneer grabbed Nora Whitmore by the arm and shoved her off the platform into the snow. 10 years old, barefoot, bleeding from the lip where she had bitten through it, trying not to scream. She did not scream. She got up, wiped the blood with the back of her hand, and looked at the crowd of good Christian people who had just watched a child get thrown into a snowbank and done nothing. Then she walked back to the platform, planted herself in front of her little brother, and said 3 words that stopped every heart in Silver Creek, Montana. Over my body. Before we begin this story, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel and follow this story all the way to the end. And please, leave a comment telling me what city you are watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now, let us begin. The boy had not spoken in 6 months. 5 years old, small enough to disappear inside his own coat, and silent as a stone at the bottom of a frozen river. He held a stuffed bear missing half its fur, pressed it against his chest like it was the only thing keeping his heart beating. And maybe it was. Silas Whitmore stood on a wooden platform in front of the Silver Creek Methodist Church, while strangers looked at him the way people look at horses they are thinking about buying. Measuring, calculating, deciding if he was worth the trouble. His sister stood beside him. Nora had her hand on his shoulder, gripping so hard her knuckles had gone white. She had promised their mother 2 things before the fever took her. Keep Silas safe. Keep Silas close. She intended to keep both promises, even if it killed her. The Orphan train had arrived that morning, pulling into Silver Creek through a blizzard that had buried the tracks in 3 feet of snow. 22 children had stepped off that train into air so cold it burned the lungs. 22 children who had lost everything and were now being arranged on a platform like merchandise at a general store. Pastor Whitfield handled the proceedings. He was a thin man with a voice that carried and eyes that did not see children when he looked at the platform. He saw problems to be solved, mouths to be placed, burdens to be distributed among families who needed field hands or kitchen help, or something to fill the silence in a house that had lost its own children to the territory's endless hunger for young lives. "Lot number 9, Whitfield called out, checking his ledger. "Silas Whitmore, age 5, healthy, quiet, very quiet." He paused, letting the implication hang. "No behavioral issues. Would suit any family seeking a young son." A woman in the front row leaned toward her husband. "He is the right age, and he does not talk, which means he will not argue." "We will take the boy," the man said, raising his hand. "Excellent!" Whitfield marked his book. "The placement fee is no." The word came from Nora. She stepped in front of Silas, blocking him from view with her own body. Her bare feet left red marks on the snow-dusted platform. "No, he is my brother. We go together." That was the agreement. Mrs. Calloway at the orphanage promised we would not be separated. Whitfield's smile tightened. "Miss Whitmore, we have discussed this. Mrs. Calloway is not here, and Mr. and Mrs. Hackett have generously offered. They offered to take him, not me, not both of us, just him." Nora's voice shook, but did not break. "Because he is small and quiet and easy. Because nobody wants a 10-year-old girl who asks questions and does not know when to shut up. But he is my brother, and I am the only person in this world who knows what he needs." "Child, please be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Nora's eyes blazed. "You put us on a train for 3 days with no blankets. You fed us once. Silas has not eaten since yesterday morning, and you are telling me to be reasonable?" The crowd shifted. Some people looked away. Some crossed their arms. The Hacketts whispered to each other, their faces tightening with the particular expression of people who had come for a simple transaction and found themselves in the middle of something unpleasant. "We only want the boy," Mrs. Hackett said. "The girl is too old. Too much trouble." "I am not trouble." Nora dropped to her knees and wrapped both arms around Silas. "I am his sister. I am the one who held him when Mama died. I am the one who fed him when the orphanage forgot. I am the one who—" "That is enough." Whitfield snapped his fingers. "Mrs. Grady, restrain this child." The matron moved forward, a large woman with tired eyes and rough hands. She reached for Nora's arm. Nora twisted away, pulling Silas tighter against her chest. "You cannot have him without me. You cannot." "Release the boy, Miss Whitmore. You are making a scene." "Good. Someone should." Mrs. Grady got both hands on Nora's shoulders and pulled. Nora held on to Silas with everything she had, which was more than anyone expected from a girl her size. The crowd watched in uncomfortable silence as two adults tried to pry apart two children who had nothing left but each other. And Silas made no sound through any of it, just pressed his face into his sister's neck and held that bare like it was the last real thing in a world that had stopped being real 6 months ago. That was when the man at the back of the crowd stepped forward. He had been standing there for 20 minutes, half hidden behind the general store awning, watching with eyes the color of a winter sky. Tall, broad-shouldered, a face that looked like it had been carved from the same granite that made up the Montana mountains, weathered and hard, and carrying the kind of stillness that came from years of living alone. Caleb Thornton had not planned to come to town today, had not planned to be anywhere near the orphan train or the auction or anything involving children. He had come for salt and grain and barbed wire, the things a ranch needed to survive winter, and he had intended to load his wagon and ride back to his property without speaking to another human being, the way he had done every supply run for the past 5 years. But he had heard the girl's voice from inside the store, had heard her say, "Over my body," and something in those 2 words had stopped him cold. Not the defiance, the fear underneath it. The sound of someone who knew they were going to lose, and had decided to fight anyway, because losing without fighting was worse than losing after you had given everything. He knew that sound, had made that sound himself once, a long time ago, in a situation he had spent 5 years trying to forget. "How much?" Caleb said. His voice was not loud, did not need to be. It cut through the noise the way a knife cuts through rope, clean and final. Whitfield looked up. "I beg your pardon?" "Both of them, the girl and the boy. How much?" Silence, the kind that made the wind sound loud. "Mr. Thornton," Whitfield recovered, barely. "I was not aware you were interested in—" "I am not interested in repeating myself. How much for both?" "Well, the standard placement fee is $12 per child, but there are additional costs for transport and documentation." Caleb reached into his coat, pulled out his wallet, counted bills with hands that did not shake, and set them on the podium. "That is $80. Covers everything you are about to invent a fee for. I want papers drawn today. Legal. Binding. Both children. My name." "Mr. Thornton, with all due respect, you are—" Whitfield lowered his voice. "You are a single man, a bachelor, living alone on a ranch 7 miles from town. The board has guidelines about suitable placements. The board just watched 2 grown people try to rip a 5-year-old out of his sister's arms, and nobody said a word. I do not think the board gets to lecture me about suitable." Caleb kept his eyes on Whitfield. "Papers, today, or I ride to Helena and file with the territorial judge, and I promise you that conversation will include a detailed account of how children are handled at these auctions." Whitfield looked at the money, looked at Caleb, looked at the crowd, who were watching with expressions ranging from shock to something that might have been relief. I will prepare the documents within the hour, Whitfield said. Caleb turned to the platform. The matron had backed away. The Hacketts were already leaving, their faces pinched with the particular offense of people who had been denied something they felt entitled to. Nora stood on the platform with Silas behind her. She was shaking, not from cold, though she had to be freezing, barefoot in January. Shaking from adrenaline, from the effort of holding herself together, from the whiplash of going from certain defeat to something she did not dare call hope. She looked at Caleb the way a wolf looks at a trap that might also be food, wanting, suspicious, ready to bite. Caleb crouched down slowly, made himself smaller, met her at her level. I am not going to separate you, he said quietly. First thing, you and your brother stay together. That is not a discussion. Why? Nora's voice was raw. Why do you want us? Nobody wants both. They want him because he is small and quiet, or they want neither because I am too much. Nobody wants both. I reckon nobody is not the same as me. Caleb held out his hand, palm up. My name is Caleb Thornton. I have a ranch north of here. Big place. Quiet. Warm, which matters more today than most days. Room for 2 children who need somewhere to land. Nora stared at his hand like it might disappear. What do you want from us? Right now? Just for you to come with me. Get warm. Get food. Let your brother breathe somewhere that is not a platform. And after that? After that, I figure we work it out as we go. Nora searched his face. Caleb let her look. He had nothing to hide. Nothing except a U.S. Marshal badge locked in a drawer back at the ranch. A name he had been running from for 5 years. And a debt he did not yet know he owed to the woman who had given birth to these 2 children. Silas does not talk, Nora said finally. That is all right. I am not much of a talker myself. He has nightmares. Bad ones. Almost every night. We will handle it. And I am difficult. Everyone says so. I ask too many questions, and I do not do what I am told, and Nora. Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. I did not ask for easy. I asked for both of you. There is a difference. Something cracked behind those fierce brown eyes. Not breaking, just cracking enough to let something through. She reached out and placed her hand in Caleb's palm. Her fingers were small, rough, ice cold, and they gripped his with a ferocity that said everything her words could not. Caleb stood, drawing Nora up with him. Silas followed, pressed against his sister's side. But as Caleb turned to step off the platform, the boy's hand shot out and grabbed a fistful of his coat. Not his hand, just his coat. Holding on. The whispers started before they reached the wagon. Caleb heard fragments as he guided the children through the crowd. Nora walking beside him with her spine straight and her chin up despite the bleeding lip and the bare feet. Silas riding on his hip because the boy had reached for him with his eyes, and Caleb had understood. Lost his mind. 2 children. What is a man like that going to do with 2 children? Give it a month. He will send them back. Those poor things. Out of one bad situation, straight into another. Caleb kept walking. He had spent 5 years not caring what Silver Creek thought of him. He was not about to start now. His wagon was behind the general store. He lifted Silas onto the bench first, then offered Nora his hand. She climbed up mostly on her own, refusing to need more help than she absolutely had to accept. Caleb pulled a blanket from behind the seat and laid it across both children without comment. He checked the horses, climbed up beside them, and drove north out of Silver Creek. They rode in silence for the first mile. The road wound through pine forest heavy with snow. The branches bowed under the weight of it. The world was white and still and cold. and the only sound was hooves crunching through ice and the creak of the wagon and Silas's breathing, which had slowed into the rhythm of a child falling asleep against his sister's shoulder. "You scared?" Caleb asked, without looking at Nora. She was quiet for a moment. "Should I be?" "Probably not. But I expect you will be anyway, until you have a reason not to be." "Most people would tell me not to be scared, that everything is going to be fine." "Most people are liars." Nora turned her head to look at him. "You are not going to tell me everything is fine?" "I do not know if everything is fine. I know you will have a roof tonight that does not leak, food that is hot, beds with blankets thick enough to keep you warm even when the temperature drops below zero. Your own room, or the same room if that is what you and Silas need." "Same room," Nora said immediately. "I need to be able to reach him." "Same room then." Another mile passed. Silas had gone limp against Nora, fully asleep, the bear tucked under his chin. Nora adjusted her grip on her brother, pulling him closer, and Caleb saw her wince. "You are hurt," he said. "I am fine." "Your feet are bleeding." "I said I am fine." Caleb reached under the seat and pulled out a pair of wool socks. He set them between them on the bench without a word. Nora looked at them, looked at him, and after a long moment, pulled them on. Her jaw tightened as the wool touched raw skin, but she did not make a sound. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a while. "You are going to ask whether I say yes or not." The ghost of something that was not quite a smile crossed her face. "Are you rich?" "I do all right." "That is what rich people say when they do not want to admit it." "I have a ranch that runs 400 head of cattle and 60 horses. I have money in the bank and no debts. Whether that makes me rich depends on who you ask." $80 is a lot of money." "It is." "You just had it in your coat like it was nothing." "It was not nothing." Caleb kept his eyes on the road. "It was you and your brother." Nora was quiet for a long time after that. She sat with her back straight and her hand on Silas, and her eyes watching the snow-covered hills roll past, and Caleb could feel her thinking. Working through the equation of a man who spent $80 on 2 children he had never met, trying to find the hidden cost, the catch, the moment where kindness turned into something else. He did not blame her. In her experience, kindness always had a price. "Mr. Thornton." "Caleb." "Mr. Thornton." She was not ready for first names. "Where are your boots from?" "San Antonio, long time ago." "They are marshal boots. I have seen them before. The deputy in Cedar Falls wore the same kind." Nora paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was very careful. "You used to be a lawman, did you not?" Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. "What makes you say that?" "The way you walk. The way you stood at the back of the crowd and watched everything before you moved. The way you talked to Pastor Whitfield, like you were used to giving orders and having people listen." Nora looked at him sideways. "Mama said you could always tell a lawman by his boots and his eyes. She said lawmen have eyes that are always looking for trouble, even when there is none." "Your mama was a smart woman." "She was. She was the smartest person I ever knew." Nora's voice wavered for the first time. "She is dead now." "I know. I am sorry." "Do not be sorry. Be useful." Nora wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, hard and fast, like she was angry at herself for crying. "That is what Mama used to say. Sorry does not fix anything. Being useful does." Caleb nodded slowly. "Your mama was right about that, too." "So, were you a lawman?" "I was a U.S. Marshal, 5 years ago. I quit." Why? Because I followed an order that got an innocent woman killed. Because I kicked in the door of a house in Cedar Falls looking for an outlaw and found a woman and her children instead. Because the outlaw had already gone, and the woman was not a threat, but I did not know that, and by the time I realized my mistake, it was too late. But he did not say any of that. Because I made a mistake, Caleb said. The kind you do not come back from. The kind that follows you, no matter how far you run. Nora studied him with those sharp brown eyes. That is not an answer. It is all the answer I have right now. Mama always said men who give half answers are hiding something. Your mama was right about most things, I reckon. She was right about everything. Nora pulled the blanket tighter around Silas. And somebody killed her for it. Caleb turned his head. What? You heard me. Nora's voice dropped low. They said it was fever. They said she got sick and died. But she did not just get sick. She was fine that morning. Fine. We had breakfast. She was working. And then a man came to see her, and they argued, and he gave her something to drink, and an hour later she was on the floor, and she could not breathe, and she... Nora stopped, swallowed. She died. Just like that. 1 hour. Nora, that is, I know what I saw. Her eyes burned. And I know nobody believed me. A 10-year-old girl from a poor family saying a rich man poisoned her mother. Who is going to listen to that? I am listening, Caleb said quietly. Nora looked at him, really looked, searching for the lie, the dismissal, the polite disbelief she had encountered from every adult she had tried to tell. She did not find it. The man who came to see Mama, Nora said slowly. He was tall, gray hair at the temples. He wore a silver ring with an eagle on it. And he told Mama that if she did not burn certain papers, bad things would happen to me and Silas. Caleb's blood went cold. A silver ring with an eagle. He knew that ring, had seen it on the hand of a man he had reported to once, a long time ago. What papers? Caleb asked, keeping his voice steady. I do not know exactly. Mama found them when she was cleaning the courthouse. Papers about land, about money. She said important people were stealing from families who could not fight back. She said she had to tell someone. And then the man came. And then the man came. And then Mama died. The wagon creaked through the silence. Silas slept. The snow fell. And Caleb Thornton sat very still while the past he had been running from for 5 years caught up to him on a frozen road in Montana, wearing the face of a 10-year-old girl who had just described the murder of a woman by people he used to work for. Nora, Caleb said carefully, I am going to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. I always tell the truth. It is all I have left. Your mother, what was her full name? Nora frowned. Hannah. Hannah Whitmore. The name hit Caleb like a bullet to the chest. His vision went white. His hands locked on the rein so hard the leather cut into his palms. Hannah Whitmore. The woman from Cedar Falls. The woman whose door he had kicked in 5 years ago on a warrant that turned out to be wrong. The woman who had been alive when he left that house, but shaken, terrified, traumatized in ways he had told himself were not his fault because he had not pulled the trigger, had not raised his hand, had just followed orders and left when he realized the mistake. But she had been alive. She had survived that night. And then, years later, she had died anyway. Not from a marshal's boot through her door, but from poison in her cup. Killed by the same people who had sent Caleb to her house in the first place. Mr. Thornton? Nora's voice came from far away. "You do not look well." Caleb forced himself to breathe, forced his hands to loosen on the reins, forced his face into something that was not horror, not guilt, not the sick understanding that the debt he owed was deeper and more terrible than he had ever imagined. "I am fine," he said. "Just cold." But he was not fine, and he knew, with a certainty that settled into his bones like the Montana winter, that he had not found these children by accident, that whatever God or fate or broken justice system had put him at that auction today had done it for a reason. He owed Hannah Whitmore a debt he could never repay, and her children, sitting beside him on this wagon, trusting him with their lives, were the only currency that mattered. The ranch appeared over the last hill as the sun dropped behind the mountains. Nora drew in a breath when she saw it. The main house, solid timber and stone, built to withstand anything Montana could throw at it. Barns and corrals behind it, horses standing in the snow with their breath-making clouds in the cold air. "That is yours?" Nora whispered. "Ours," Caleb said, and he let the word stand, because it felt right, even though nothing else did. He drove the wagon to the front of the house and set the brake. Before he could climb down, the front door opened and a woman stepped onto the porch. Ruth Calloway stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and her medical bag at her feet, because she had heard about the orphan train and had come to make sure no child left that auction without being checked by an actual doctor. She had not expected to find them here. She looked at the wagon, at the two children, at Caleb's face, which must have shown everything he was feeling, because Ruth's expression went through surprise, then concern, then something sharp and knowing. "Caleb Thornton," Ruth said, "what have you done?" "Ruth, this is Nora, and the little one sleeping is Silas. They are staying." "Staying." Ruth came down the steps slowly, her eyes moving from Caleb to Nora, measuring, assessing the way a doctor does when she is looking for damage that does not show on the surface. "Those children need food, warm water, and that girl's feet need looking at before infection sets in." Ruth held out her hand to Nora. "Come inside, child. When is the last time you ate something warm?" Nora looked at Ruth's hand, looked at Caleb, who nodded, looked at Silas, still sleeping against her shoulder. Then she took Ruth's hand and let herself be led inside. Caleb followed, carrying Silas. And as he crossed the threshold of his house with a child in his arms for the first time in 5 years of living alone, he felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, just cracking enough to let something through that he had kept sealed away for so long he had forgotten what it felt like. Fear. Hope. And the sick certainty that the man Nora had described, the man with the silver eagle ring, who had poisoned Hannah Whitmore, was someone Caleb knew, someone he had trusted, someone who was still out there, still powerful, still dangerous. And now that man's victims were sleeping under Caleb's roof. The war had not ended when Caleb quit the marshals. It had just been waiting for him to pick a side. Tonight, holding a silent boy who gripped a one-eared bear like a lifeline, Caleb Thornton picked his side. Silas woke up screaming at 2 a.m. Caleb was out of bed before his feet hit the cold floor, moving down the hallway on instinct. The same instinct that had carried him through doors and into danger for years when he wore a badge. He reached the children's room and found Nora already sitting up, pulling Silas against her chest, rocking him, whispering words Caleb could not hear. He stood in the doorway, unsure if he should enter. This was their ritual, their private language of comfort built over months of loss. He had no right to it. But Nora looked up and saw him, and instead of telling him to go away, she said, "He dreams about the night Mama died. Every time. The same dream." Caleb knelt beside the bed. Silas was shaking, his face buried in Nora's shoulder, the bear crushed between them. His breathing came in ragged gasps that sounded too big for his small body. "What does he see?" Caleb asked quietly. "He will not tell me. He does not talk about it." Nora stroked her brother's hair. "But afterward, he draws. Every time he has the nightmare, he draws what he saw. In the morning, I find the pictures under his pillow." "What kind of pictures?" Nora hesitated. "Pictures of a man. The same man I told you about. Tall, gray hair, the ring." She paused. "And sometimes he draws a woman. Not Mama. Someone else. Someone who came after the man left." Caleb's chest tightened. "A second person was there?" "I do not know. I was hiding with Silas in the bedroom. I only saw through the crack in the door. I saw the man. I saw him give Mama the tea. I saw her fall. But Silas," Nora's voice dropped. "Silas went back out. After I pulled him into the bedroom, he went back out while I was trying to figure out what to do. He was only 4. He did not understand. He just wanted Mama." "He went back into the room where your mother was dying?" "Yes, and when I found him, he was sitting on the floor beside her, holding her hand. And there was someone else in the house. I heard footsteps. I heard a voice. But by the time I got to Silas and dragged him back to the bedroom, whoever it was had gone. And Silas saw them." "Silas sees everything." Nora pulled the blanket tighter around her brother. "He just cannot say it." Caleb sat on the floor with his back against the wall and stayed there until Silas stopped shaking and Nora's eyes grew heavy, and both children drifted back into the uneasy sleep of people who had learned that rest was borrowed, never owned. He did not go back to his own bed. He sat in the hallway with the lamp burning low and thought about Hannah Whitmore, about the night 5 years ago when he had followed orders and kicked in her door, about the look on her face when she saw the badge, the gun, the men behind him, about her children screaming in the next room. He had told himself for 5 years that he had not hurt her, that following a bad warrant was not the same as pulling a trigger, that she had been alive when he left, shaken but alive, and whatever happened to her afterward was not his fault. But now he knew what happened afterward. She had rebuilt her life, moved to Silver Creek, found work, raised her children alone. And then she had stumbled onto something dangerous, something that powerful people wanted kept secret. And those same powerful people had killed her for it. The same system that had sent Caleb to her door with a wrong warrant had sent a man with a silver ring to her door with poison. The same corruption, the same disregard for the lives of people who did not matter to people who had power. And Caleb had been part of that system, had worn its badge, had followed its orders, had broken down the door of the woman whose children now slept in his house. He pressed his palms against his eyes until he saw stars. "You look like a man who has been arguing with God and losing." Ruth stood at the end of the hallway, wrapped in a heavy shawl, a cup of something steaming in each hand. She had stayed the night after examining the children, partly because the snow had gotten worse, and partly because she did not trust Caleb to handle 2 traumatized children alone. "Could not sleep," Caleb said. "I heard the boy. Nightmares?" "Every night, according to Nora." Ruth handed him a cup and sat down across from him in the hallway, her back against the opposite wall. "Those children have been through something terrible, Caleb. More terrible than being orphaned. More terrible than the train. That girl is carrying a weight no 10-year-old should carry." "I know." "Do you? Because from where I am sitting, you look like a man who jumped into a river to save someone without checking if he could swim." "I can swim." "Can you? You have been alone on that ranch for 5 years. You do not talk to people. You do not come to town unless you have to. And now you have 2 children who need more than food and shelter. They need patience, consistency. They need someone who is not going to disappear when it gets hard. I am not going to disappear. That is easy to say on the first night. What about the 10th night? The 50th? When Nora pushes every boundary you set? When Silas still will not speak? When the nightmares do not stop, and you realize that love is not enough to fix what is broken in those children? Ruth sipped her tea. What then? Then I figure it out. Same as everything else. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. Ruth studied him for a long moment. The lamplight caught the angles of her face, the sharpness of her gaze, the particular expression of a woman who had spent her life reading people and did not like what she was reading now. Why did you take them, Caleb? The truth, not the version you told Whitfield. I told you they needed. Do not insult me. You walked into that auction looking for something. I saw your face when you heard that girl's name. Whitmore. You recognized it. So I am asking you one more time. Why did you take them? Caleb set his cup down. The porcelain clinked against the wood floor, and the sound felt too loud in the quiet house. Because I owe a debt, he said. To whom? Their mother. Ruth went very still. You knew Hannah Whitmore? Not the way you think. Caleb's voice dropped. 5 years ago, I was a U.S. Marshal. I was sent to a house in Cedar Falls on a warrant for a man named Daniel Briggs. Weapons smuggling. The warrant was signed by a territorial judge. Everything was legal. Everything was proper. He paused. The house belonged to Hannah Whitmore. Briggs was not there. Had not been there for months. But I did not know that when I went through the door. You raided her home. I raided her home. At night. With 4 armed men. Her children were in the next room. She was terrified. She thought we were going to kill her. Caleb's hands clenched. We did not touch her. Did not harm her. We searched the house, realized the warrant was wrong, and left. I apologized. She looked at me like she would never feel safe again. Ruth set down her cup with deliberate care. And 2 months later, I found out the warrant was not just wrong, it was fabricated. The judge who signed it wanted Hannah's property. Her husband had died, she was alone, and the land was valuable. The raid was meant to scare her into selling. Who was the judge? A man named Everett Harlan. The name dropped into the silence, like a stone into still water. Ruth's expression did not change, but something behind her eyes shifted, hardened, locked into place. Judge Everett Harlan, Ruth said slowly, who now sits on the bench in Silver Creek. The same. The man who controls half the land rights in this territory. The man everyone in this town answers to. That Everett Harlan. Yes. Ruth stood up. She walked to the window at the end of the hallway and stood there for a long time, looking out at the snow falling in the darkness. Hannah Whitmore came to see me, Ruth said, her voice quiet. 3 days before she died. She came to my office, and she was scared. Not sick, scared. She said she had found something. Papers in the courthouse where she worked cleaning. Papers that proved Judge Harlan had been forging land deeds and stealing property from homesteaders for years. Caleb's stomach dropped. She told you this? She told me this. And she told me something else. Ruth turned from the window. She said a man had come to see her. A man who worked for Harlan. A man who told her to keep her mouth shut, or her children would pay the price. The man with the silver ring. Wade Prescott, the sheriff of Silver Creek. The name hit Caleb with the force of physical impact. Wade Prescott. He knew that name too. Had served alongside him, briefly, in the Marshal Service, before Prescott had taken the sheriff position in Silver Creek. Had seen him at Harlan's side, loyal as a dog, willing to do whatever the judge required. "Prescott killed Hannah," Caleb said. "I believe so, but I cannot prove it. The death certificate says typhoid. The body was buried within 2 days. No autopsy, no investigation. The doctor who signed the certificate is Harlan's personal physician." "And you did nothing?" Ruth's eyes flashed with an anger so fierce it could have burned through the wall behind him. "I am a black woman with Crow blood, practicing medicine in a territory that does not believe I should be allowed to read, let alone diagnose. I went to the county prosecutor. He told me I was hysterical. I went to the newspaper. They told me I was mistaken. I went to the church. They told me to pray about it." She stepped closer. "I did not do nothing, Caleb. I did everything I could with the nothing I was given." "I'm sorry. I did not mean—" "Yes, you did. And that is fine. Be angry. But aim it at the right people." Ruth sat back down. Hannah Whitmore found evidence that could destroy Judge Harlan. She tried to do the right thing, and it got her killed. Now her children are orphans, and the man who murdered their mother walks the streets of this town with a badge on his chest. "And I brought those children into my house, 7 miles from town, 7 miles from Prescott and Harlan and everyone who had a reason to want Hannah silenced." "Now you are catching up." Caleb pressed his fist against his forehead. "They are going to come for the children." "Maybe, maybe not. Right now, Harlan does not know the children have any connection to you beyond charity. As far as he knows, you are a recluse rancher who took pity on 2 orphans. But if he finds out you used to be a marshal, if he finds out you know about the warrant, if he figures out that those children might know what their mother knew, then we are all dead. Then you are all in danger. Dead is what happens when you stop fighting." Ruth leaned forward. "Caleb, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. Are those children yours, biologically?" "No, I have no biological connection to them." "Then your only tie to them is guilt." "My tie to them is that I helped destroy their mother's life 5 years ago, and she is dead now, and they have nobody. That is not guilt. That is responsibility." "There is a difference?" "There is to me." Ruth searched his face for a long time. "All right," she said finally. "Then we need to be smart about this. If Nora is right, if her mother was murdered, then the evidence Hannah found is still out there somewhere. Hannah was too smart to destroy it and too scared to hand it over. She would have hidden it." "The papers from the courthouse." "Yes, and I think Nora knows more than she is saying. That girl watches everything, remembers everything. Her mother would have told her something, left her something, a backup plan, insurance." Caleb thought about Nora's sharp questions, her careful observations, the way she had cataloged every detail of their conversation on the wagon ride. She mentioned a notebook, her mother's. She carries it everywhere. "Have you seen it?" "No, she sleeps with it." "Then we need to earn enough trust for her to show us, not take it, not demand it. Earn it." Ruth stood. "I will come back tomorrow. Check on the children's health. Keep things looking normal." She paused at the stairs. "And Caleb, whatever you do not go into town asking questions about Hannah Whitmore. Do not mention her name. Do not give Harlan any reason to look at you twice." "I understand." "Do you? Because understanding and doing are different things, and you have a history of acting before thinking." "I am not a marshal anymore, Ruth." "No, you are something more dangerous. You are a man trying to pay a debt. Men like that do stupid things." She disappeared down the stairs, and Caleb sat alone in the hallway, listening to the wind drive snow against the walls, and the soft breathing of two children who did not know that the man who had taken them in was connected to the man who had destroyed their lives. Morning came gray and heavy with the promise of more snow. Caleb had not slept. He was in the kitchen when Nora appeared, already dressed, Silas trailing behind her like a shadow. The boy held his bear in one hand and a piece of charcoal in the other. He went straight to the kitchen table, pulled a blank sheet from the stack Caleb kept for supply lists, and began to draw. Nora watched her brother for a moment, then turned to Caleb. He does this every morning after a nightmare. Draws what he dreamed. You said he draws the man, the one who came to see your mother. Yes, Nora sat across from Caleb. But lately the drawings have been different, more detailed, like he is remembering things he could not remember before. Caleb looked at Silas. The boy's hand moved steadily across the paper, his small face locked in concentration. He drew with a precision that was startling for a 5-year-old, each stroke deliberate, each detail placed with care. Nora, I need to ask you about your mother's notebook. Nora's hand went to her pocket, a reflexive, protective gesture. What about it? Ruth thinks your mother might have left something important in it. Information about what she found at the courthouse. Evidence. I know what is in it. Nora's chin came up. Mama wrote everything down. Names, dates, numbers, things she heard, things she saw. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should keep the notebook safe and find someone I could trust. Have you found someone? Nora looked at him for a long time. Her eyes moved across his face like she was reading a map, checking every landmark against what she already knew. I do not know yet, she said. Fair enough, but I will tell you one thing that is in it, because you need to know. Nora pulled the notebook from her pocket and set it on the table, but she did not open it. She kept her hand flat on the cover. Mama wrote down the name of the man who threatened her. The man with the silver ring. Wade Prescott. Nora's eyes widened. How do you know that? Ruth told me last night. Your mother went to her before she died. Told her she was afraid. Dr. Calloway knew? Nora's voice sharpened. She knew Mama was in danger, and she did not help? She tried. Nobody would listen. Nobody ever listens. Nora's hand pressed harder against the notebook. But that is not all. Mama wrote down something else. She wrote down the name of the man Prescott works for. The man who wanted her land in Cedar Falls. The man who had her house raided by marshals. Caleb could not breathe. She wrote his name, and she wrote what he did, and she wrote that the marshal who came to her door that night looked like he did not want to be there, like he knew something was wrong, like he was following orders he did not believe in. Nora. Mama described him, tall, gray eyes, a scar on his left eyebrow, young but with old eyes. Nora opened the notebook and turned it to face Caleb. She drew his face. She was good at drawing. That is where Silas gets it. Caleb looked down at the page and saw his own face staring back at him, rendered in Hannah Whitmore's careful hand. 5 years younger, still wearing the badge, standing in her doorway with a gun and an apology that would never be enough. That is you, Nora said quietly. Is it not? Caleb could not move, could not speak, could only stare at the drawing of the man he used to be, captured in graphite by the woman he had helped destroy. You were the marshal who raided our house in Cedar Falls, Nora continued, her voice steady as a blade. You broke down our door. You terrorized our mother. Silas was 3 years old. I was 5. I remember the sound of the wood breaking. I remember Mama screaming. I remember hiding under the bed with Silas and thinking we were going to die. Nora, did you know the warrant was fake? Not when I served it. Not until 2 months later. And when you found out, what did you do? I quit. I turned in my badge and I left." "You left?" Nora's voice was flat. "You found out that someone used you to terrorize an innocent woman and 2 children, and your response was to leave. Not to make it right, not to expose them, not to protect my mother. You just left." "Yes. Like every man who has ever been in our lives. You just left." Caleb deserved that, deserved every word and worse. He sat there and took it, because there was nothing he could say that would make it less true. "And now you show up at the Orphan train 5 years later and buy us for $80 and bring us to your ranch and expect us to be grateful?" Nora's eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. "What is this? Guilt? Redemption? Are we your second chance, Mr. Thornton? Are we how you sleep at night?" "You are not my second chance," Caleb's voice cracked. "You are my responsibility, because I was part of what happened to your mother, and I cannot undo that, and sorry does not fix anything. And the only thing I can do, the only thing that matters, is making sure you and Silas are safe." "Safe? You think we are safe here? 7 miles from the man who killed Mama? 7 miles from the judge who stole our land and destroyed our family? And now we are living with the man who helped them do it?" Nora slammed the notebook shut. "We are not safe. We have never been safe. And you cannot make us safe, because you are part of the reason we are in danger in the first place." She grabbed the notebook, grabbed Silas by the hand, and pulled him toward the door. "Nora, wait. Why? So you can lie to me some more? So you can pretend to be a good man while the people who killed Mama sleep warm in their beds?" "Because I am not going to let them get away with it." Nora stopped at the door. She did not turn around. "Your mother found evidence that can destroy Judge Harlan and everyone who works for him. Prescott killed her to protect that secret. But the evidence still exists, and your mother was smart enough to hide it where they would never think to look." Caleb stood. "I know who these people are. I know how they operate. I know their weaknesses because I used to be one of them. And I am telling you that if we are careful, if we are smart, if we work together, we can bring them down." Nora turned slowly. "Why should I trust you?" "You should not. I have done nothing to earn your trust. But I am asking you to give me a chance to try. Not for me, for your mother." Silas tugged his hand free from Nora's grip. He walked back to the table, picked up his drawing, and held it up for them both to see. It was a picture of a man in a dark coat standing in a room. The man had gray at his temples and something on his hand that Silas had drawn as a circle with a bird inside it. A silver ring with an eagle. But this drawing had something Nora had not described. Behind the man, half hidden in a doorway, was a second figure, a woman. And in her hand, drawn with the careful precision of a child who remembered everything, was a small bottle. Nora took the drawing from her brother's hand. Her face went white. "There was someone else there that night," she whispered. "A woman. Silas, who is this?" Silas looked at his sister, looked at Caleb, opened his mouth, and for the first time in 6 months, made a sound. Not a word, just a sound, small and broken, like a door that had rusted shut trying to open. Then he pointed at the woman in the drawing and traced the outline of her dress. Long, expensive, and around her neck, drawn in careful detail, a necklace with a single stone. "I know who that is," Caleb said, his blood running cold. Because he had seen that necklace, had seen it at every town function, every public event, every Sunday service. It belonged to the wife of Judge Everett Harlan, the most powerful woman in Silver Creek. And she had been in Hannah Whitmore's house the night Hannah died. Nora looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at Nora, and between them, Silas sat down at the table and began to draw again, pouring out memories his mouth could not release, one careful line at a time. The notebook lay on the table between them, full of a dead woman's truth, waiting for someone brave enough to use it. Ruth arrived at the ranch before noon. She took one look at the drawing Silas had made, at the woman with the necklace and the bottle in her hand, and sat down hard in the kitchen chair like someone had cut the strings holding her up. "Miriam Harlan," Ruth said quietly. "She was there." "You sound like you are not surprised," Caleb said. "I am not. Miriam Harlan has spent 30 years standing behind her husband, making sure his hands stay clean while hers do the work." Ruth picked up the drawing and studied it. "But I never thought she would do this herself. I thought Prescott was the one who—" She stopped. "Both of them. Prescott gave Hannah the first dose, and when it was not enough, Miriam came to finish it." "Why would she come herself? Why take that risk?" "Because Hannah had something Miriam wanted. The papers. The evidence. Prescott was sent to scare Hannah into handing them over. When that did not work, Miriam came to get them herself." Ruth set the drawing down, and to make sure Hannah could never talk about what she had seen. Nora had been standing in the doorway, listening. She stepped into the kitchen with Silas behind her. "Mama did not give her the papers. I know she did not, because Mama hid them before the man came. She knew someone was coming. She was scared all day." "Where did she hide them?" Ruth asked. Nora looked at Silas. The boy was sitting at the table again, drawing. But this time, he was not drawing the night their mother died. He was drawing something else. A building. A room inside the building. And in the corner of the room, drawn with careful precision, a loose floorboard with something underneath it. "The courthouse," Nora said softly. "Mama hid the papers back where she found them, in the courthouse, under the floor of the records room." Caleb leaned forward. "She put them back?" "She said it was the safest place, that nobody would think to look for stolen papers in the building they were stolen from. She said—" Nora's voice caught. "She said if anything happened to her, I should find someone I trusted and tell them where the papers were. But she also said I should never go get them myself. She said the courthouse was too dangerous." "She was right," Ruth said. "The courthouse is Harlan's domain. His office is there. Prescott's office is across the hall. There are deputies coming and going at all hours." "But the records room is in the basement," Caleb said. "I have been there. When I was a marshal, I filed reports there. It is cold, it is dark, and nobody goes down there unless they have to." "You are not thinking what I think you are thinking," Ruth said. "I need those papers, Ruth. Without them, all we have is a 10-year-old girl's testimony, a 5-year-old boy's drawings, and the word of a woman the town already ignores. Harlan will crush us in court and take the children before we can blink. And if you get caught breaking into the courthouse, he will have you arrested, and then he takes the children anyway. Then I do not get caught." "Caleb," Ruth's voice went hard. "This is not a raid. You are not a marshal anymore. You do not have a badge or a warrant or anyone backing you up. You are one man trying to break into a building controlled by the most powerful family in the territory. I have done harder things. And some of those harder things destroyed people's lives. Hannah Whitmore's, for instance." The words landed like a slap. Caleb absorbed them. He deserved them. "I know what I did," he said quietly. "I know who I was. But I also know what is in that basement, and I know that without it, these children have no future. Harlan will find a way to take them. He will find a way to silence them. And everything Hannah died for will be buried right along with her." Ruth looked at Nora. "What do you think, child? It is your mother's evidence, your decision." Nora did not hesitate. "We get the papers, but not just him. Me too." "Absolutely not," Caleb said. I know where they are. Mama described the exact spot. Third floorboard from the wall, second row from the door, on the left side. She made me memorize it. She made me say it back to her 10 times until I could recite it in my sleep. Nora, I am not taking you into that building. Then you will not find them. The records room has 200 floorboards. You could search for hours and never find the right one. I can find it in 30 seconds. Caleb looked at Ruth. Ruth shook her head, but said nothing, which meant she knew Nora was right, and hated it. This is not a game, Caleb said. I know it is not a game. My mother is dead. Nothing about this has ever been a game. Nora's eyes were fierce. You said we'd do this together. You said you would not leave us out. Well, this is together. Either I come with you, or you go alone and fail. Caleb rubbed his face with both hands. He was being outmaneuvered by a 10-year-old, and the worst part was, she was right. When? Ruth asked. Friday night. There is a town council meeting at the church. Harlan will be there. Prescott will be there. Half the town will be there. The courthouse will be empty. That is 2 days from now. Then we have 2 days to prepare. Ruth stood and walked to the window. She stood there for a long time, her back straight, her hands clasped behind her. When she turned around, her face had changed. The caution was gone. In its place was something harder, older, forged in years of being told to be quiet and sit down and know her place. I will help, she said, not because I think this is wise, because Hannah Whitmore came to me for help, and I failed her. I will not fail her children. Ruth, if this goes wrong, I am a black woman who broke into a white man's courthouse. I know exactly what happens to me. Ruth's voice did not waver. I have known that risk my whole life. It has never stopped me before. They spent the next 2 days planning, with the kind of careful precision that came from knowing there would be no second chance. Ruth gathered information about the town council meeting, confirmed that Harlan and Prescott would both attend, mapped the route from the ranch to the courthouse that avoided the main road. Caleb checked the courthouse layout from memory, identified entry points, calculated timing. And Nora drilled herself on the location of the floorboard until she could close her eyes and walk through the records room in her mind, counting boards, measuring steps, finding the exact spot her mother had described in the last days of her life. Silas drew, picture after picture. The courthouse, the records room, the loose floorboard. It was as if by drawing the plan, he was contributing the only way he could. And mixed among the strategic drawings were others. Hannah at her sewing table, Hannah reading to the children. Hannah standing in a doorway, looking over her shoulder with eyes that held a warning. On Thursday night, the night before the operation, Caleb found Nora sitting on the porch in the cold, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. He sat beside her. The cold was brutal, well below zero, but neither of them moved to go inside. Mr. Thornton. Caleb. Mr. Thornton. She was still not ready. If something goes wrong tomorrow, if they catch us, what happens to Silas? Nothing is going to happen to Silas. That is not what I asked. I asked what happens to him if they catch us, if they take us away. He has nobody, just me. And if I am gone... Ruth will take him. We have already arranged it. If anything goes wrong, she takes Silas and rides to Helena. I have a lawyer there, Frederick Walsh. He knows the situation. He will protect them. You planned for us getting caught. I planned for everything. Did you plan for us dying? Caleb turned to look at her. She was staring straight ahead, her jaw set, her eyes dry. She was 10 years old, and she was asking about death with the calm practicality of a soldier before battle. Nobody is dying tomorrow, Caleb said. Mama thought she was safe too. Nora pulled the blanket tighter. She thought if she just hid the papers and kept quiet, everything would be fine. She thought they would leave us alone. And then Prescott came to our door, and Miriam Harlan came after him, and Mama died on the kitchen floor while Silas held her hand. Nora, I am not scared of dying. I am scared of Silas being alone. He is 5 years old. He does not talk. He has nightmares every single night. And without me, he has nobody who understands him. Nobody who knows that he likes his bear tucked under his left arm, not his right. Nobody who knows that he draws when he is afraid, because drawing is the only way he can make sense of what happened. Nobody who... Her voice broke. For the first time since Caleb had met her, Nora Whitmore broke. The tears came fast and hot, and she pressed her fists against her eyes, trying to stop them. Furious at herself for crying. Furious at the world for making her need to. Caleb put his arm around her. She stiffened, resisted for 1 second, 2 seconds, and then collapsed against him, sobbing into his coat with the desperate abandon of a child who had been holding herself together for too long. "I am so tired," she whispered. "I am so tired of being brave." "Then stop. Just for tonight. Let someone else be brave." "There is nobody else." "There is me." She cried for a long time. Caleb held her and said nothing because there was nothing to say. No words could fix what had been broken. No promises could undo what had been done. All he could offer was presence, the simple, insufficient act of being there. When the tears stopped, Nora pulled back and wiped her face. "Do not tell Silas I cried. Would not dream of it. And do not think this means I trust you." "Understood. It just means," she struggled with the words, "it means I do not have anyone else to cry on right now. That is all." "That is enough." She stood, pulled the blanket around herself like armor, and walked toward the door. Then she stopped. "Mr. Thornton?" "Yeah?" "Mama's notebook, the drawing she made of you, the marshal who came to our door." Nora paused. "She wrote something under it, a note. I never told you what it said." "What did it say?" "It said, 'This one had kind eyes. He did not want to be there. Maybe someday he will come back and do the right thing.'" Nora looked over her shoulder. "She believed in you, even after what you did. She believed you would come back." Then she went inside, leaving Caleb alone in the cold, with the weight of a dead woman's faith pressing down on him harder than anything he had ever carried. Friday came like a held breath. Ruth arrived at dusk, left her horse in the barn, and spent an hour with the children while Caleb prepared. She checked their health, fed them dinner, read Silas a story from a book she had brought from her office. The boy sat in her lap and listened with his eyes wide and his bear tucked under his left arm. And when Ruth's voice caught on a particularly tender passage, Silas reached up and touched her face with his small hand. The gesture was so gentle, so unexpected, that Ruth had to close the book and hold him for a moment before she could continue. At 7, the town council meeting began. Caleb watched through Ruth's field glasses as lamplight filled the church windows and the last stragglers filed through the doors. He counted heads, saw Harlan's tall figure take a seat in the front, saw Prescott's lean silhouette near the back, positioned where he could watch the room. Saw Miriam Harlan in her usual place beside her husband, her necklace catching the lamplight. "They are all inside," Caleb said. "How long does the meeting usually last?" Nora asked. She was already dressed in dark clothes, her hair braided tight, her mother's notebook in her pocket. 2 hours, sometimes 3 if Harlan has business to push through. "Then we have 2 hours. We have 90 minutes. We leave 30 minutes before the meeting ends. No exceptions. Agreed. Ruth knelt beside Nora. You remember the plan? I go in through the basement window on the east side. Count 17 steps to the records room door. Third floorboard from the wall, second row from the door, left side. Get the papers, get out. And if something goes wrong? I run. I do not stop. I do not go back. I run to the horses and I ride to the ranch, and Ruth takes me and Silas to Helena. Good girl. Ruth put her hands on Nora's shoulders. Your mother would be proud of you. My mother would be terrified. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. They rode to town in silence, left the horses tied in the same grove Ruth used when she visited patients at night. Approached the courthouse from the east, keeping to the shadows, their boots crunching in frozen snow. The building was dark, empty. The basement window was exactly where Caleb remembered, low to the ground and latched from the inside. I can fit through that, Nora whispered. You cannot. I know. That is why you are going in and I am staying here. Caleb pulled out a thin piece of metal and worked it into the window latch. 10 seconds. A click. The window swung inward. Cold air rushed up from the basement below. Nora, 90 minutes, not a second more. She looked at him in the darkness. If I am not back in 90 minutes, do not come after me. Take Silas and go. That was not the plan. I am changing the plan. Silas needs you more than he needs those papers. She held his gaze. Promise me. Caleb wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at him to go in with her, to protect her, to not let a 10-year-old girl walk into danger alone. But the window was too small for him. And Nora was right. Silas needed him. 90 minutes, he said. Nora lowered herself through the window, her small body disappearing into the darkness below. Caleb heard her feet touch the floor, heard her breathing, quick but controlled. Then silence as she moved deeper into the basement. He counted seconds. Each one felt like a year. Inside, Nora moved through the darkness with her hands outstretched, counting steps the way her mother had taught her. 17 steps to the records room door. She found it, tried the handle. Locked. She pulled a hairpin from her braid. Mama had taught her this, too. Said a woman who could not open a locked door was a woman who could be trapped. The lock was old, simple, and gave way in 20 seconds. The records room smelled like dust and old paper, and the particular cold of underground spaces that never saw sunlight. Nora got on her knees and began counting floorboards. Third from the wall. Second row from the door. Left side. She found it. The board was loose, just slightly, just enough to get her fingers under the edge. She pulled. The board came up with a groan that sounded deafening in the silence. Underneath was a space barely larger than a bread box, and in that space, wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from moisture, was a bundle of papers. Nora's hands shook as she pulled them out. She did not try to read them in the dark, just tucked them inside her coat, against her chest, and replaced the floorboard. She was halfway back to the window when she heard the front door of the courthouse open. Footsteps overhead. Heavy. Deliberate. A man's tread. Nora froze. The footsteps moved across the floor above her, toward the stairs that led down to the basement. She pressed herself against the wall and stopped breathing. The basement door opened. Lamplight spilled down the stairs, and a voice, one Nora recognized from the worst night of her life, called out. I know someone is down here. I saw the window open from across the street. Wade Prescott's voice was calm, almost pleasant, the voice of a man who was used to being in control. Come out now and this goes easy. Make me come find you, and it goes different. Nora did not move, did not breathe. Her hand went to her pocket, where she kept the small folding knife her mother had given her for cutting thread. It was not much of a weapon, but it was something. Prescott's boots appeared at the top of the stairs. He began descending, slow, methodical. The lamplight swinging with each step, throwing shadows across the walls. "You know," Prescott said conversationally, "I told Harlan those papers would come back to haunt us. I told him we should have torn up that floor and found them months ago. But the judge is a careful man, does not like to leave evidence of evidence, if you follow my meaning." He reached the bottom of the stairs. The lamp illuminated the basement in harsh yellow light. Nora was pressed behind a wooden shelf stacked with old records, her body folded into the smallest shape she could make. Now who would be fool enough to break into a courthouse in the middle of winter? Prescott moved through the basement, checking corners, pushing aside boxes. Not many people even know about those papers. Hannah Whitmore knew, but Hannah Whitmore is dead. He paused. Unless she told someone before she died. A friend, maybe. A doctor. Another pause. Or her children. He was close now, 2 shelves away. Nora could smell him. Tobacco and leather and something sharp that might have been whiskey. "The girl," Prescott said softly. "Nora. 10 years old. Too smart for her own good. Just like her mother." He moved 1 shelf closer. "I heard about you, child. Heard Caleb Thornton took you in. Thought that was interesting. A former marshal taking in the children of a woman he once terrorized. Guilt is a powerful thing." 1 shelf away. Nora gripped the knife. "Come out, Nora. I know it is you, and I know you have the papers. Give them to me, and you walk out of here. Keep them, and—" Prescott chuckled. "Well, you know what happened to the last person who tried to keep them." Nora closed her eyes. She thought about Silas, about his bear, about his drawings, about the sound he had made when he tried to speak, that broken, rusty sound of a door opening after too long. She thought about her mother standing in the kitchen, watching Prescott pour the tea, knowing what was in it, knowing she was going to die, looking at her children through the bedroom door with eyes that said, "Run." And she thought about Caleb, about the man who had broken down their door 5 years ago and come back to try to make it right, about his hand, palm up, on the platform, about his voice saying, "I did not ask for easy. I asked for both of you." Nora opened her eyes. She did not run. She did not hide. She stepped out from behind the shelf and stood in the lamplight, 10 years old, barefoot, bleeding where she had cut her hand on the floorboard nail, holding a bundle of papers against her chest and the sewing knife in her right hand. "You killed my mother," she said. Prescott stared at her. Whatever he had expected, it was not this. Not a child who stepped into the light instead of cowering in the dark. "Give me the papers, girl." "No. You do not understand what you are dealing with." "I understand exactly what I am dealing with. You are a murderer. You poisoned my mother. And Miriam Harlan came after you and finished the job, because you could not even do that right." Prescott's face changed. The pleasant mask dropped. Underneath was something cold and flat and empty. "Smart girl. Too smart." He reached for her arm. The window behind him shattered inward. Caleb Thornton came through it like a storm, hitting the ground in a roll and coming up between Prescott and Nora in one fluid motion. He was too big for the window. He had torn his coat and cut his shoulder on the glass, and he did not care. "Touch her," Caleb said, "and I will kill you." Prescott stepped back. His hand went to his hip, but his gun was not there. He had left it at the church. Town council meetings did not require weapons. and he had not expected to need one tonight. Thornton should have known. Prescott's voice was steady, but his eyes were calculating, measuring distances, looking for exits. The guilty marshal and the dead woman's daughter. This is touching. It is over, Prescott. Nora has the papers. Ruth has copies of Hannah's notebook, and by morning, a lawyer and Helena will have everything. You think papers matter? You think a notebook matters? Harlan owns the courts. Harlan owns the territory. You cannot touch him with paper. Maybe not, but I can touch him with testimony. Caleb held his ground. Nora saw you poison her mother. Silas saw Miriam Harlan finish the job. And I know about the false warrant on Hannah's house in Cedar Falls, because I was the fool who served it. Something shifted in Prescott's face. A crack in the armor. The first sign of real fear. You would testify against Harlan? You would destroy yourself to bring him down? I would burn everything I have to the ground to keep those children safe. You are insane. Probably, but I am also the man standing between you and a 10-year-old girl, and you do not have your gun, and I am bigger than you, and I have spent 5 years chopping wood and breaking horses and not sleeping, which means I am angry and strong, and I have nothing to lose. Caleb stepped forward. Walk away, Prescott. Walk away right now, and you might still have time to run before the territorial marshal arrives. You are bluffing. I sent a letter to Helena 3 days ago. Marshal Thomas Avery. He was my commanding officer. He is the only man in the territory I trust, and he has been looking for a reason to investigate Harlan for years. I gave him that reason. Prescott looked at Caleb, looked at Nora, who stood behind him with the papers clutched to her chest and the knife still in her hand, looked at the broken window and the open basement and the cold night beyond. This is not over, Prescott said. No, Caleb agreed. It is just beginning. Prescott turned and walked up the stairs. His footsteps crossed the floor above them, and the front door opened and closed. The silence that followed was enormous. Nora's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the cold floor, the papers spilling from her arms, and pressed her hands against her face. She was shaking so badly her teeth chattered, and Caleb could not tell if it was cold, or fear, or the aftermath of standing up to the man who had killed her mother. He knelt beside her and pulled her against him. She let him. No resistance this time. No stiffness. Just a child, exhausted and terrified, and brave beyond anything he had ever witnessed, letting someone hold her because she could not hold herself up any more. You did it, Caleb said. You found them. He was right there. He was right there, and I could smell him, and I thought about Mama, and I thought he was going to... He did not. He will not. I am here. You came through the window. I did. You were bleeding. I know. You are too big for that window. I know that too. The ghost of a laugh, broken and wet with tears, escaped her. Mama was right. You do have kind eyes. Caleb gathered the papers from the floor, helped Nora to her feet, and lifted her through the window into the cold Montana night, where Ruth was waiting with the horses, her face tight with fear that dissolved into fierce relief when she saw them both alive. They rode hard back to the ranch. Nora held the papers against her chest the whole way, and Caleb rode beside her with blood running down his arm and the certain knowledge that Prescott was already on his way to Harlan, that the judge would know by morning what had happened, and that the next 48 hours would determine whether they lived or died. When they reached the house, Silas was standing in the doorway. He had gotten out of bed and come downstairs alone, something he had never done without Nora. He stood there in his nightgown, with copper pressed against his chest and his eyes enormous in the lamplight. Nora ran to him and dropped to her knees, wrapping him in her arms. Silas pressed his face into her shoulder and held on. Then he pulled back, looked at his sister's face, looked at the papers in her hand, and in a voice that was small but clear, clearer than anything he had managed before, he said his first real word in 6 months. "Safe?" Nora's face crumpled. She pulled him close again and whispered, "Yes, baby. We are safe. We got them. Mama's papers. We got them." Silas nodded against her shoulder. Then he looked past her at Caleb, who stood in the doorway, bleeding and exhausted, and holding the evidence that could destroy the most powerful man in the territory. "Stay," Silas said. His second word, small and fierce and aimed directly at Caleb like an arrow. Caleb knelt down so he was level with the boy. "I am staying, Silas. I am not going anywhere." Silas studied his face the way his sister did, looking for the lie, the escape, the moment kindness turned to leaving. He did not find it. He held out copper, offered the bear to Caleb with both hands, the way a knight might offer a sword, and the gesture held the same weight. Caleb took the bear, held it carefully, understood what it meant. Trust. Fragile, terrified, hard-won trust, offered by a child who had learned the hardest way possible that trust was dangerous, but who was choosing to try anyway. Caleb handed the bear back gently. "You hold on to him for tonight. I reckon he needs you more than he needs me." Silas took Copper back, tucked him under his left arm, and reached for Caleb's hand with his free one. His fingers were tiny and warm, and they gripped with the same ferocity his sisters had, that first day on the platform. The three of them stood there in the doorway, while Ruth watched from the porch, and the Montana wind drove snow against the walls, and somewhere in town, a sheriff was telling a judge that his empire was crumbling. And for one moment, just one, the world was quiet enough to hear what mattered. 2 children holding on, 1 man holding still. And outside, the storm building towards something none of them could stop. The petition arrived at dawn. A rider came through the snow before the sun cleared the mountains, his horse steaming with effort, and handed Caleb an envelope with a territorial court seal. Caleb opened it, standing on the porch, with his coat over his nightclothes and his breath making clouds in the frozen air. Emergency hearing, guardianship review, filed by Miriam Harlan on behalf of the Silver Creek Child Welfare Committee. Grounds: moral unfitness, criminal association, failure to provide suitable environment. Judge Samuel Whitaker presiding, appointed by the territorial governor because Judge Harlan had recused himself from all matters involving Caleb Thornton. The hearing was set for Monday, 3 days away. "They are not even trying to hide it," Ruth said when she read the petition. She had stayed the night, sleeping in the chair beside the children's door, with her medical bag at her feet, like a soldier who would not leave her post. "This is retaliation, pure and simple. You took their papers, so they are taking your children. They are not my children yet. Legally, I am a temporary guardian with a placement contract from an orphan train. Any court in the territory could overturn that." "Any court controlled by Harlan, you mean?" "Whitaker is not Harlan's man. He is appointed by the governor. And the governor owes Harlan 3 political favors and a land deal. Do not be naive, Caleb." Nora appeared in the kitchen doorway. She had heard everything. Caleb could tell by the way she held herself, spine rigid, chin up, hands clenched at her sides. The same posture she had taken on the auction platform. Battle stance. "They want to take us away from you," she said. It was not a question. "They want to try." "Because of the papers." "Because of everything. The papers, the break-in." Prescott told Harlan what happened, and now Harlan is using the only weapon he has left. The courts. His courts. Not this time. Whitaker is independent. He has a reputation for fairness. Mama had a reputation for honesty, and it did not save her. Nora sat down at the table. What do we do? We fight. We go to that hearing with every piece of evidence we have. The papers from the courthouse, your mother's notebook, Silas's drawings, Ruth's testimony about what Hannah told her before she died, my testimony about the false warrant. Caleb paused. And your testimony about the night your mother was killed. They will say I am lying, a 10-year-old girl making up stories. Then we make them prove it. We put the evidence in front of Whitaker and let him decide. And if he decides against us? Caleb looked at her. Then we run. I told you that before. West, to Oregon or California. Somewhere Harlan cannot reach. I told you before. I do not want to run. I want to fight. And I told you we would fight first, but I will not let them put you and Silas in Harlan's hands. If the court fails us, we leave. That is not cowardice. That is keeping you alive. Nora absorbed this. Then she pulled her mother's notebook from her pocket and set it on the table. She opened it to the last page, the one she had never shown anyone, and turned it to face Caleb. It was a letter, written in Hannah Whitmore's careful hand, dated 3 days before her death. Read it, Nora said. Caleb read, To whoever finds this. My name is Hannah Whitmore. I'm a cleaning woman at the Silver Creek Courthouse, and I have found evidence that Judge Everett Harlan has been stealing land from homesteaders through forged deeds and fraudulent court orders for at least 7 years. The evidence is hidden beneath the floorboards of the records room. 3rd board from the wall, 2nd row from the door, left side. I have told Sheriff Wade Prescott that I know what the judge has done. I should not have told him. He works for Harlan. I realize that now. I am afraid for my life and for my children. If something happens to me, please protect my daughter Nora and my son Silas. They are all that matters. And please, if you can, make sure the truth comes out. Not for me. For all the families Harlan has destroyed. For the homesteaders who lost everything. For the people who trusted the law and were betrayed by it. I am not a brave woman. I am just a mother who found something she was not supposed to find. But I believe the truth matters, even when it is dangerous. Especially when it is dangerous. Hannah Whitmore, January 3rd, 1887. Caleb set the letter down. His hands were shaking. She wrote that 3 days before she died, Nora said. She knew she was in danger. She knew Prescott might come for her. And instead of running, instead of hiding, she wrote down the truth and left it where I could find it. She was braver than she gave herself credit for. She was braver than anyone I have ever known. Nora's voice cracked. Including you. Including me, Caleb agreed. This letter, can we use it in court? It is a dying declaration, written evidence from a murder victim naming her killers and describing their crimes. Any judge worth his oath would admit it. Then we use it. We use everything. And if that is not enough, Nora closed the notebook. Then I get on that stand and I tell them what I saw. Every detail, every sound, every smell. I tell them about Prescott pouring the tea, about Miriam Harlan coming after he left, about Mama dying on the floor while Silas held her hand. Nora, they will try to tear you apart on that stand. Harlan's lawyer will call you a liar. He will say you are a disturbed child with a grudge. He will try to make you cry, make you confused, make you contradict yourself. He can try. I have been called worse by better people. Nora met his eyes. I did not survive the last year by being fragile, Mr. Thornton. I survived it by being angry, and I am very, very angry. The 3 days before the hearing passed like a fever dream. Frederick Walsh arrived from Helena on Saturday, a thin man with wire spectacles and the quiet confidence of someone who had won cases in front of judges who started out hating him. He reviewed the evidence, interviewed Nora, examined the courthouse papers, and read Hannah's letter 3 times. "This is strong," Walsh said. "Stronger than they expect." The letter alone changes everything. It is not just evidence of Harlan's crimes. It is evidence that Hannah knew she was going to be killed and named her killers in advance. That is the kind of thing that makes juries weep and judges pay attention. "We are not in front of a jury," Caleb said. "This is a guardianship hearing." Technically, yes. But Whitaker is smart enough to know this hearing is not really about guardianship. It is about whether a judge and a sheriff murdered a woman to cover up land fraud. And once that question is in the room, everything changes. "What about Caleb's past?" Ruth asked. "They will bring up the warrant, the raid on Hannah's house. They will try to paint him as part of the conspiracy." Let them. Caleb quit the marshals when he discovered the warrant was false. That shows conscience, not complicity. And his willingness to testify against Harlan, against the system he once served. That shows courage. Walsh looked at Caleb. "You will need to be honest on that stand. Completely honest. About the raid. About what you knew and when you knew it. About why you quit." "I can do that." "Can you do it without breaking? Because Harlan's lawyer will try to destroy you. He will call you a vigilante, a criminal, a man who bought children to ease his guilty conscience. He will say you are unfit, unstable, dangerous." I have been called all of those things by the voice in my own head for 5 years. I reckon I can handle hearing them from a stranger in a suit. Walsh almost smiled. "Good. Then we are ready." But they were not ready. Not for what came next. On Sunday morning, the day before the hearing, Caleb woke to find Silas gone. His bed was empty. Copper was on the pillow, which was wrong. Silas never left the bear. Nora was still sleeping, her hand resting on the space where her brother should have been. And the window was open, cold air pouring in. Caleb moved fast. He checked every room in the house, the barn, the corrals. Nothing. Silas's small footprints led from the window into the snow, heading south, toward town. "Nora!" Caleb shook her awake. "Silas is gone." Nora sat up, saw the empty bed, saw the bear, and her face went white. "No, no, no, no! He never leaves Copper. He would never." "His tracks go south, toward Silver Creek." "Why would he go to town? He is terrified of town." "I do not know, but I need to find him before someone else does." Ruth was already saddling horses when Caleb reached the barn. "I saw the tracks from the bunkhouse window. He has maybe a 2-hour head start." "In this cold, a 5-year-old on foot." "I know. We ride fast." Nora appeared already dressed, her mother's notebook in one pocket, and the small sewing knife in the other. "I am coming." Caleb did not argue. There was no time. They rode south through snow that was knee-deep in the drifts and crusted hard enough to bear a child's weight in the open stretches. The tracks were clear, small boot prints spaced evenly apart, moving with a purpose that was unsettling. Silas had not wandered. He had walked in a straight line, due south, as if he knew exactly where he was going. "He has been drawing the courthouse for days," Nora said, her voice tight with fear. "Drawing the records room, the floorboard. I thought he was just processing what happened. But what if he was planning something?" "Planning what?" "I do not know. But Silas remembers everything. He remembers the night Mama died. He remembers the woman with the necklace. He remembers things I do not even know about because he cannot tell me." Nora's voice shook. What if he went to find her? What if he went to find Miriam Harlan? Caleb pushed his horse harder. They found Silas in Silver Creek, standing in front of the Harlan house in the bitter cold of a January morning. He had walked 7 miles through the snow in the dark. His lips were blue, his hands were raw, but he was standing, perfectly still, staring at the front door of the biggest house in town. Caleb jumped off his horse and ran to him. He scooped the boy up and held him close, feeling the small body shaking with cold, feeling the heartbeat that was too fast and too faint. Silas, Silas, look at me. The boy looked at him. His green eyes were clear, focused, burning with something that was not fever and not fear. It was purpose. Why? Caleb asked. Why did you come here? Silas pointed at the house. Then he pointed at himself. Then he opened his mouth and spoke in a voice that was stronger than it had been. Still rough, still rusty, but real. She needs to see me. Who needs to see you? The woman. The one who hurt Mama. She needs to see me. She needs to know I remember. Nora dismounted and ran to her brother. She grabbed his face in both hands and looked into his eyes. Silas, what are you doing? You could have died out there. You could have frozen. She thinks nobody saw. Silas's voice was small but certain. She thinks Mama is gone and nobody saw what she did. But I saw. And she needs to know. Before the court, she needs to know that I saw everything. Why? Why does she need to know before the court? Because Mama said. Silas's eyes filled with tears. Mama said when she was dying, she looked at me and she said, "Tell them. Tell them what happened. Make them see you." He was shaking, not from cold, but from the effort of pushing words through a door that had been sealed shut for 6 months. I have to make her see me, so she knows she cannot hide anymore. The front door of the Harlan house opened. Miriam Harlan stood in the doorway. She wore a housecoat, and her hair was down, and the emerald necklace was not around her neck. But she was unmistakable. Tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of a woman who had never been challenged by anyone she could not destroy. She looked at the group in her front yard, at Caleb holding a half-frozen child, at Nora standing beside them with murder in her eyes, at Ruth watching from horseback with a calm intensity of someone documenting evidence. "What is the meaning of this?" Miriam said. "Get off my property." "Your property?" Nora said. "How much of your property used to belong to someone else? How many families did your husband steal from? I will not be spoken to by a child. Remove yourself, or I will call the sheriff." "Call him," Caleb said. "We would love to have a conversation with Wade Prescott about what happened in Hannah Whitmore's house the night she died." Miriam's face did not change. That was what made it terrifying. Not a flicker of guilt, not a flash of recognition. Just the smooth, practiced mask of a woman who had learned to control every muscle in her face the way she controlled everything else. "I have no idea what you are talking about." Silas squirmed in Caleb's arms. Caleb set him down, and the boy took 2 steps toward the porch. 2 steps toward the woman who had helped kill his mother. "You wore the red dress," Silas said. His voice carried in the frozen air. "You came after the man with the ring left. You poured something in Mama's cup, something that smelled like apples. Mama tried to push it away, but you held her hands and made her drink." Miriam's mask cracked. Just a fraction. A tightening around the eyes, a slight withdrawal. The involuntary response of someone hearing a truth they thought was buried forever. "And then Mama fell. And then she was shaking. And then you took papers from the table and you put them in your coat. And then you looked at me." Miriam's hand went to the doorframe. "You looked right at me," Silas continued, his voice shaking but not stopping. "I was in the hallway. I was supposed to be in the bedroom, but I came out because Mama was making sounds, bad sounds. And you saw me, and you said—" Silas's face crumpled. "You said, if you tell anyone, you will end up just like her." The silence that followed was absolute. The wind stopped. The snow stopped. The whole world held its breath. "That is a lie," Miriam said. But her voice had changed. The steel was gone. Underneath was something brittle, something that might shatter if pressed. "It is not a lie," Silas said. "I do not lie. Mama said lying was for people who were afraid of the truth. I am not afraid anymore." Miriam looked at Caleb. "Control this child." "No." "I will have you arrested, all of you. Trespassing, harassment, slander." "Go ahead. We will be in court tomorrow anyway, and so will every piece of evidence Hannah Whitmore hid before you killed her." "I did not kill anyone." "Then you have nothing to worry about." Caleb picked up Silas and held him close. "We will see you in court, Mrs. Harlan." He turned and walked away. Nora followed. Ruth followed. And behind them, standing in her doorway in the January cold, Miriam Harlan watched them go, with an expression that was no longer controlled, no longer practiced, no longer the mask of a woman who believed she was untouchable. It was the face of someone who had just realized that the wall she had built around herself was not as strong as she thought, and that the crack in it was shaped like a 5-year-old boy who had finally found his voice. They rode home in silence. Silas fell asleep against Caleb's chest before they cleared the edge of town, his body warming slowly, his breathing settling into the rhythm of a child who had done something terrifying and survived. Nora rode beside them, her face wet with tears she no longer bothered to hide. "He walked 7 miles in the snow," she said. "He could have died." But he did not. "He did it for Mama." He did it for himself, too. Caleb adjusted his grip on the sleeping boy. He has been carrying that secret for 6 months, carrying it alone because Prescott told him what would happen if he talked. And today he decided he was done carrying it. "He is 5. "I know. And he is braver than any man I have ever met." "Do not say that. He is not supposed to need to be brave. He is supposed to be playing in the snow and laughing and being a normal little boy." Nora's voice broke. "He is 5 years old, and he walked through a blizzard to confront the woman who killed his mother. That is not brave. That is broken." "Maybe it is both." "It should not have to be both." "No, it should not." They reached the ranch as the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Walsh was pacing the porch, his thin face tight with anxiety that dissolved into relief, and then hardened into fury when he heard what had happened. He confronted Miriam Harlan directly? To her face? He told her exactly what he saw the night Hannah died. That is either the most courageous thing I have ever heard or the most reckless. She will be prepared now. She will have her lawyers ready. She will have a counter-narrative. She was already prepared, Walsh. She has had a year to prepare. The difference is that now she knows we are not afraid of her. Caleb carried Silas inside and laid him on the bed. The boy did not wake. Nora climbed in beside him, wrapped around him the way she always did, shield and sister, and the only constant in a world that kept trying to tear them apart. Caleb stood in the doorway and watched them sleep. Ruth came up behind him. "You know what happens tomorrow?" "I know. Every secret comes out, yours included. The raid on Hannah's house, the false warrant. The fact that you were part of the machine that destroyed her life before Prescott finished the job. I know. Those children will hear everything. Nora already knows, but hearing it in court, in front of everyone, from a lawyer trying to use it as a weapon, that is different. I know, Ruth. And you are willing to stand there and let them do it? I am willing to stand there and tell the truth. All of it. Every ugly piece. Because Hannah Whitmore wrote in her notebook that the truth matters, especially when it is dangerous. And I spent 5 years hiding from that. I am done hiding. Ruth put her hand on his shoulder. Hannah was right about you. You do have kind eyes. Kind eyes and a guilty conscience. Same thing sometimes. Ruth squeezed his shoulder. Get some sleep, Caleb. Tomorrow is going to be the hardest day of your life. Ruth? Yes? If something goes wrong, if they take the children, if Harlan wins. He will not win. But if he does. Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then I take the children, and I ride west, and I do not stop until Montana is a memory. Promise me. I promise. Caleb nodded. Then he sat down in the chair beside the children's bed, the same chair Ruth had slept in that first night, and he watched Nora and Silas sleep. He watched the rise and fall of their breathing. He watched Nora's hand tighten reflexively around her brother's arm, even in sleep, holding on. And he thought about tomorrow, about the courtroom, about the truth that would come pouring out like water through a broken dam, drowning everything in its path, destroying the careful walls he had built around his past and the careful walls Harlan had built around his crimes. He thought about Hannah Whitmore, who had believed the truth was worth dying for. He thought about Nora, who had believed the truth was worth fighting for. He thought about Silas, who had walked 7 miles through a blizzard because his dying mother had told him to make them see. And he decided that if the truth destroyed him, then that was a price worth paying. Because some things mattered more than survival. Some things mattered more than safety. Some things mattered more than the careful, controlled, empty life he had built to keep the world at a distance. These children mattered. Their mother's memory mattered. And the truth, dangerous and terrible and necessary, mattered most of all. Caleb closed his eyes. Tomorrow he would walk into a courtroom and set fire to everything. Tonight he would sit beside 2 sleeping children and guard them through the dark. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was everything he had. The courtroom was full before the doors officially opened. Half of Silver Creek had come, drawn by gossip and the particular hunger people have for watching powerful things fall apart. They filled the benches and stood along the walls and pressed against the windows from outside, their breath fogging the glass. Caleb saw familiar faces. The shopkeeper from the general store. The woman who ran the boarding house. Ranchers he had nodded to in passing for 5 years without ever learning their names. All of them watching. All of them waiting. Caleb walked in with Nora on his right and Silas on his left. Ruth followed, carrying her medical bag and a folder of documents. Walsh was already at the front, arranging papers with the calm efficiency of a man who had done this 100 times and never gotten used to it. Miriam Harlan sat in the front row. She wore black, as if she were the one in mourning, and her emerald necklace caught the light every time she turned her head. Beside her sat Marcus Webb, a lawyer from Helena, whose reputation for destroying witnesses was well earned and well known. Webb looked at Caleb and smiled the way a man smiles at something he intends to take apart. Wade Prescott was not there. His seat was empty. "Where is the sheriff?" Caleb asked Walsh. "Nobody knows. He did not show up at the jail this morning. His horse is gone from the livery." Walsh's voice was low. He ran, Caleb. When he realized what was coming, he ran. That helps us. That helps us and hurts us. We cannot put a missing man on the stand, but his absence speaks volumes. Walsh straightened his glasses. Are you ready? No. Good. Honest men are never ready for this kind of thing. Liars are. Judge Samuel Whitaker entered through the side door and took his seat. He was not what Caleb had expected. Small, bald, unremarkable. The kind of man you would pass on the street without noticing. But his eyes were sharp and steady, and they swept the courtroom with the particular attention of someone who understood that justice was fragile and required constant vigilance. This hearing concerns the guardianship of Nora and Silas Whitmore, currently in the temporary care of Mr. Caleb Thornton, Whitaker said. Mistress Miriam Harlan has filed a petition to revoke that guardianship on grounds of moral unfitness. Mrs. Harlan, through your counsel, you may present your case. Webb stood. He was tall, silver-tongued, and polished in a way that made you trust him, right up until he put the knife in. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Mr. Thornton is a disgraced former U.S. Marshal who was dismissed from service after conducting an unlawful raid on a civilian home. He is a bachelor with no experience raising children. He acquired these children through what can only be described as an impulse purchase at an orphan auction, and he has since involved them in criminal activity, including the break-in at the Silver Creek Courthouse 3 nights ago. Webb paused for effect. Furthermore, Mr. Thornton has no biological connection to these children, no family ties, no legal standing beyond a temporary placement contract. He is, in the eyes of the law, a stranger who bought 2 orphans and has been using them to pursue a personal vendetta against respected members of this community. Webb sat down. The courtroom murmured. Walsh stood slowly. He did not rush, did not perform. Just stood and spoke like a man telling the truth to a friend. Your Honor, I will not waste this court's time arguing about Mr. Thornton's fitness as a guardian. Instead, I will present evidence that this petition is not about child welfare. It is about silencing witnesses to a murder. The murmur became a roar. Whitaker banged his gavel twice. Order! Counselor, that is a serious allegation. It is, Your Honor, and I intend to prove it. I call Caleb Thornton to the stand. Caleb stood. His legs felt heavy. He walked to the front of the courtroom and took the oath with his hand on the Bible and his eyes on Nora, who sat in the front row with Silas in her lap and her chin up and her mother's notebook in her pocket. Mr. Thornton, Walsh said, tell the court about your history with these children. Caleb told them everything. He started with the warrant, the raid on Hannah Whitmore's house in Cedar Falls, the door he kicked in, the woman who screamed, the children who hid under a bed. He told them about discovering the warrant was fabricated, about quitting the marshals, about the 5 years of guilt that followed him like a shadow he could not outrun. He told them about the orphan train, about hearing Nora's voice through the wall of the general store, about stepping forward and paying $80 for 2 children he had never met, because he owed their dead mother a debt that no amount of money could repay. You participated in an unlawful raid on these children's home, Walsh said. Is that correct? Yes. And you knew the raid was based on a fabricated warrant? Not at the time. I learned the truth 2 months later. What did you do when you learned the truth? I quit. I turned in my badge, and I left. Did you report the fabricated warrant to your superiors? Caleb paused. No, I did not. Why not? Because I was a coward. Because the warrant was signed by a territorial judge, and I told myself that reporting it would be pointless, that the system would protect its own. So I ran instead of fighting. Caleb looked at the courtroom. I have been running for 5 years. I am done. Webb cross-examined with surgical precision. Mr. Thornton, you expect this court to believe that a man who participated in terrorizing a family, who fled instead of reporting corruption, who then purchased that same family's orphaned children at an auction, is a suitable guardian? I expect this court to believe that a man who did wrong is trying to do right. And breaking into the courthouse? Was that doing right? Those papers were hidden by Hannah Whitmore to protect herself and her children. They are evidence of crimes committed against dozens of families in this territory. Recovering them was necessary. It was criminal. Sometimes justice requires breaking rules that were designed to protect the people committing injustice. That is a convenient philosophy for a man who has made a career of breaking rules. I have made a career of making mistakes. The difference is, I am no longer pretending I did not make them. Webb paused. He had expected Caleb to crumble under pressure, to contradict himself, to reveal the cracks that would let the court dismiss him. Instead, Caleb sat there and bled openly, letting every wound show, and the courtroom could feel the weight of his honesty. Walsh called Ruth next. She took the stand with the quiet dignity of a woman who had spent her life being underestimated and had learned to use it as a weapon. Dr. Calloway, did Hannah Whitmore contact you before her death? She did. 3 days before she died, she came to my office. She was frightened. She told me she had found evidence of land fraud in the courthouse records. She told me a man had threatened her and her children if she did not keep silent. Did she name this man? Wade Prescott, the sheriff of Silver Creek. The courtroom erupted. Whitaker hammered his gavel. Order! I will clear this courtroom if necessary. And what did you do with this information, Dr. Calloway? I went to the county prosecutor. He dismissed me. I went to the newspaper. They refused to print the story. I went to every authority I could find, and every one of them turned me away. Ruth's voice was steady as stone. I am a woman of color practicing medicine in a territory that questions my right to exist. Nobody would listen, not because I was wrong, but because listening would have required challenging people with power. And then Hannah Whitmore died. And then Hannah Whitmore died. And the death certificate said typhoid. And nobody asked questions. And 2 children lost their mother. Ruth looked at Miriam Harlan. And the people responsible went to church on Sunday and sat in the front pew and told themselves they had done nothing wrong. Webb objected. Whitaker overruled. The courtroom was silent. Walsh introduced the courthouse papers next. Column after column of forged land deeds, fraudulent court orders, property transfers that had stripped homesteaders of everything they owned. Walsh read the names aloud. 12 families. 12 homes taken through lies and forgery. 12 lives destroyed so that Judge Everett Harlan could add to an empire built on stolen ground. Then Walsh produced Hannah's letter. He read it to the courtroom, every word, and by the time he reached the final line, half the gallery was in tears. I am not a brave woman. I am just a mother who found something she was not supposed to find. But I believe the truth matters, even when it is dangerous. Especially when it is dangerous. Silence. The kind that presses down on a room and makes people afraid to breathe. Walsh turned to the bench. Your Honor, I call Nora Whitmore to the stand. Nora stood. She handed Silas to Ruth, who pulled the boy into her lap and held him close. Then Nora walked to the front of the courtroom and took the oath in a voice that did not tremble. She was 10 years old. She was barefoot because her only shoes had fallen apart on the Orphan train, and she had refused the new ones Caleb bought because they did not feel right yet. She was small and thin and fierce, and she looked at the packed courtroom with eyes that dared anyone to dismiss her. Tell the court what you saw the night your mother died, Walsh said. Nora told them. Every detail. The man who came to the door, the argument, the tea, Her mother falling, the sounds she made, the way her body shook, the moment she stopped moving. "I was hiding in the bedroom with Silas," Nora said. "I saw through the crack in the door. I saw Prescott pour something into Mama's cup. I saw her drink it, and I saw her die." "And after Prescott left?" "Someone else came. A woman. She came in through the back door. She went to Mama, and she checked to see if Mama was still breathing. And when she realized Mama was still alive, she poured more poison into the cup. And she held Mama's head, and she made her drink." "Did you see this woman's face?" "No, it was dark, but I saw her dress. Long, expensive. And I saw her necklace, a green stone on a gold chain." Every eye in the courtroom moved to Miriam Harlan's neck, where the emerald necklace sat like a confession. "That is a lie," Miriam said from her seat. "I was not there. I was at home. I was—" "Mrs. Harlan, you will have your opportunity to respond," Whitaker said. "Continue, Miss Whitmore." "After the woman left, I went to Mama. She was still breathing, barely. I held her hand and I told her I loved her, and she tried to talk but she could not. She just looked at me and looked at Silas, and then she stopped breathing, and she was gone." The courtroom was weeping, not quietly, not politely. Weeping the way people weep when they are confronted with something true and terrible and can no longer look away. Webb stood for cross-examination. He looked at Nora for a long moment, and something shifted in his face. A calculation, a decision, the look of a man weighing his reputation against his conscience. "No questions, Your Honor," Webb said. The courtroom gasped. Miriam Harlan grabbed his arm. "What are you doing? You have to discredit her. She is lying. She is a child making up stories." "Mrs. Harlan," Webb said quietly, "I am a lawyer. I am not a monster. I will not cross-examine a 10-year-old girl about the night she watched her mother die." "I am paying you to—" "Keep your money." Webb picked up his briefcase and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Miriam sat alone. No lawyer, no sheriff, no husband, because Judge Harlan had not come, had stayed home, had abandoned his wife to face the consequences of their shared crimes alone. Walsh looked at Whitaker. "Your Honor, I have one more witness." Silas slid off Ruth's lap. He walked to the front of the courtroom on his own, without anyone guiding him, without anyone asking. He climbed into the witness chair, and the chair was so big and he was so small that his feet hung a foot above the floor. Whitaker leaned forward. "Son, do you understand where you are?" Silas nodded. "You do not have to speak if you do not want to. No one will force you." Silas reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of paper, a drawing, the last one he had made, finished that morning while Caleb and Nora were getting ready for court. He held it up. It showed a woman in a long dress, with a green stone at her neck, standing over a figure on the floor. The figure on the floor had dark hair and outstretched hands. And in the doorway, drawn with the heartbreaking precision of a child who had memorized every detail of the worst moment of his life, were two small figures, a girl and a boy, watching. Silas turned the drawing so the whole courtroom could see it. Then he pointed at Miriam Harlan. "You," he said. His voice was small, but it filled the room. "You hurt my mama. I watched. I remember. And I am not scared of you anymore." Miriam Harlan stood up. She looked at Silas, at the drawing, at the courtroom full of people who were no longer looking at her with respect or deference or fear. She opened her mouth to speak, closed it, opened it again. And then something happened that nobody expected. Miriam Harlan's face collapsed. Not the mask, not the performance, her actual face. The one underneath, the one she had hidden for 30 years behind composure, and cruelty, and the absolute certainty that she was above consequence. She sat down heavily. Her hands gripped the bench in front of her, and in a voice that was barely audible, she said, "I want to speak to a lawyer." "You dismissed your lawyer," Whitaker said. "Then I want to make a statement. Mrs. Harlan, I strongly advise you to—" "I want to make a statement," her voice cracked. "I am tired. I am tired of carrying this. Hannah Whitmore was not supposed to die. She was supposed to be frightened into silence. That was all. But she would not be silent. She would not stop. And Wade said the only way to be sure was—" Miriam pressed her hands against her face. "I went to her house. I went because I wanted to see for myself. I wanted to look at her and understand why she would not just let it go. Why she would risk her children's safety for papers, for documents, for the truth about things that did not concern her. And when you got there, she was already dying. Prescott had given her something. She was on the floor. Her children were in the next room. And she looked at me and she said—" Miriam's voice broke completely. "She said, 'Please take care of my babies.' She was dying and she asked me to take care of her children." The courtroom was so quiet, Caleb could hear his own heartbeat. "And I told her yes. I told her I would. And then I gave her more of the poison, because I knew that if she survived, she would destroy everything my husband had built, everything I had spent my life protecting." Miriam looked at Silas. "And that little boy was standing in the hallway watching me, 5 years old, watching me kill his mother. And I looked at him and I threatened him. I told a 5-year-old child that if he spoke, I would kill his sister." She stopped speaking. The confession hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Whitaker was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of a man who had just witnessed the worst of what people were capable of, and still believed the law mattered. "Deputies, take Mrs. Harlan into custody. The charge is murder." 2 men moved forward. Miriam did not resist. She stood and held out her hands and let them lead her away. And as she passed Caleb, she stopped. "Those children," she said, "are they safe?" Caleb looked at her. At this woman who had murdered a mother and threatened a child and built her life on stolen ground. And he saw something in her eyes that he recognized. The same thing he saw in his own mirror every morning. "They are safe," he said. Miriam nodded once. Then she was gone. Whitaker turned to the courtroom. "The petition to revoke Mr. Thornton's guardianship is denied. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented today, I am ordering a full investigation into Judge Everett Harlan, Sheriff Wade Prescott, and all associated parties. This court is adjourned." Caleb stood. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. He turned, and Nora was there, running toward him, and she hit him at full speed, wrapping her arms around his waist and pressing her face into his chest. "We did it," she said. "Mama, we did it." Silas walked over slowly. He looked up at Caleb with those enormous green eyes and held out his arms. Caleb picked him up and held him close, and the boy pressed his face into his shoulder and whispered, "Home now?" "Home now," Caleb said. Ruth stood behind them, her face wet, her hands shaking, her spine as straight as it had ever been. "Hannah would be proud," she said, "of all of you." "She would be proud of herself," Nora said. "She started this. She found the truth, and she kept it safe, and she died protecting it. We just finished what she began." They walked out of the courthouse together. The crowd parted for them, and Caleb heard things he had not heard directed at him in 5 years. Words of respect, words of gratitude. A rancher whose name he had never learned reached out and shook his hand and said, "Harlan took my brother's land 8 years ago. Thank you for this." A woman with 2 children of her own touched Nora's shoulder and said, Your mama was the bravest woman in this territory. Do not let anyone tell you different." And an old man standing by the courthouse steps removed his hat and looked at Silas and said, "You spoke up, son. That took more courage than most grown men have in a lifetime." They rode home through snow that was already melting. February was coming, and with it the first hints of a spring that felt, for the first time in years, like something worth waiting for. 3 months later, on the first warm day of April, 4 people stood in the Silver Creek Cemetery before a new headstone carved from white granite. Hannah Rose Whitmore, beloved mother, 1855 to 1887. She believed the truth was worth everything. She was right. Nora placed wildflowers at the base. Silas set down a drawing he had made, protected by glass, showing Hannah at her kitchen table, smiling, with 2 children beside her and sunlight pouring through the window. Ruth stood with her hand on Nora's shoulder. "She would have loved this stone." "She would have said it was too expensive," Nora said, "and then she would have cried because somebody cared enough to give it to her." Caleb knelt in front of the stone and pressed his palm flat against the cold granite. "Hannah, I know you cannot hear me, and I know that nothing I say changes what I did. I was part of the system that broke your life apart, and I will carry that for the rest of mine." His voice was rough. "But your children are safe. They are fed and warm and loved. Nora is learning to ride, and she is better at it than half my ranch hands. Silas talks now. Not a lot, not all the time, but every day a little more. He drew a picture of you last week, and he said, 'Mama,' out loud. And Nora cried, and I cried, and Ruth pretended she was not crying, but she was." He paused. "You were right about me. You wrote in your notebook that I had kind eyes, and that maybe someday I would come back and do the right thing. I came back too late to save you. But I was not too late for them, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure they know that their mother was the bravest person any of us ever met." Nora knelt beside him. "Mama, I found a family. Not the one you planned for us, but the one we needed. Caleb is not perfect. He burns the eggs every morning, and he cannot braid hair to save his life. And sometimes he gets quiet and sad and stares at nothing. But he stays. Every day he stays. And that is what matters." Silas knelt on Caleb's other side. He did not speak. He placed his drawing against the headstone, then reached for Caleb's hand with his left, and Nora's hand with his right. He held on tight. Ruth stood behind the 3 of them and placed her hands on their shoulders. "Hannah, you raised warriors. The world tried to break them, and it failed. I am going to make sure it keeps failing." They stayed for a long time. The April sun was warm on their faces, and the snow was gone from the hills, and somewhere in the valley, a meadowlark was singing the first song of spring. Finally, they stood and walked back to the wagon together. Caleb helped the children up, then climbed beside them. Ruth rode alongside on her horse, her medical bag strapped to the saddle, because she had patients to see that afternoon, and the world did not stop turning just because justice had been done. As they crested the hill that overlooked the ranch, Silas spoke. His voice was stronger now, still quiet, still careful with each word, but real and present, and growing clearer every day. "Papa?" It was the first time he had used the word. Caleb's breath caught. Nora went very still beside him. "Yeah, Silas? Can we stop here for a minute?" Caleb pulled the wagon to a halt. Silas climbed down and walked to the edge of the overlook. Below them, the ranch spread out in the valley. The house, the barns, The corrals, where horses stood in the spring sunshine. Smoke rising from the kitchen chimney because Ruth had left a stew on before they left that morning. Nora joined her brother, then Caleb. The three of them stood in a line, looking at everything they had fought for. "This is ours?" Silas asked. "This is ours," Caleb said. "For good." "For good," Silas repeated, testing the weight of the words. Then he nodded, satisfied, and pulled a piece of paper and a charcoal pencil from his pocket. He sat down in the new grass and began to draw. Not the ranch below, not the house or the barns or the horses. He drew the four of them. Caleb, tall with his hat in his hand. Nora, wild-haired and fierce, holding Caleb's hand. Silas between them, small but standing. And Ruth, behind them all, hands on their shoulders, steady as a mountain. Across the top, in letters that were growing stronger and more certain with each passing day, he wrote, "Our family. April 1887. We chose each other." Nora read the words and wiped her eyes. Caleb read them and felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for 5 years. Something that had been searching for a place to land, finally coming to rest. "He is right," Nora said quietly. "We chose each other. That is enough." Caleb looked at the drawing, at the family rendered in charcoal by a boy who had been silent for 6 months, and who now spoke in words and pictures that told the truth more clearly than any court document or legal brief ever could. "It is not just enough," Caleb said. "It is everything." They climbed back into the wagon and drove home. 4 people who would walk through fire and come out the other side. Not unburned, not unbroken, but together. And together they had learned what Hannah Whitmore had known all along. That truth mattered, even when it was dangerous. That family was not something you were born into, but something you built with your hands and your heart and your stubborn refusal to let go. That the world would try to break you, and sometimes it would succeed, and sometimes it would not. And the only thing that made the difference was having someone beside you who had chosen to stay. And that love, real love, the kind that was forged in loss and tested by fire and proven by the simple, daily act of showing up, was not soft or sweet or easy. It was the hardest thing any of them had ever done. And it was worth every scar. The wagon disappeared over the hill toward home. The April sun climbed higher, indifferent and eternal, shining on the just and the unjust alike, on the ending of one story and the beginning of another. And in the Silver Creek Cemetery, Hannah Whitmore's headstone stood bright and clean in the morning light, bearing words that her children would carry forward into every day of their lives. She believed the truth was worth everything. She was right. And on a hill overlooking a ranch in Montana, a boy who had once been silent held up a drawing of a family he had chosen. And the wind carried his words across the valley like a promise. "We chose each other. That is enough." It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.